game. Don't let anybody take it away from us. Nobody takes it away from us.
Nobody.
Chairman of the board, UCC alumnus, heir apparent to the title of Grand Master of the Canadian business establishment, 35-year-old Conrad Black.
I've never had any very clear or emphatic conception of the Canadian establishment. It's always been a rather indistinct concept to me, but insofar as I have any idea of what that establishment is, it has always seemed to me that it is a handful of owners and a group of extremely capable managers, so self-assured as to behave like owners. But at the core of that so-called establishment is, I think, a relatively small number of actual proprietors.
The owner of one of the world's largest privately held business empires sits on the board of Argus. He is Frederick Stephen Eaton, retailer to a nation. And here in downtown Toronto, his company sets the style. From the 20th floor of their new office tower in the Eaton Centre, Fred Eaton and his three brothers, John, Craig, George, and Thor, run a company that has 64 department stores, well over $1 billion in sales, undisclosed profits, and a name which for 111 years has been magic in Canada. The Americans might have the Kennedys and the Rockefellers, but Canada has the Eatons. They are the country's uncrowned royal family.
I think owners have a sense of pride in what they do because their name is attached to it. It was Mr. Bassett who wrote to me when I became the president of the Eaton Company, and he quoted an old Irish maxim, which is that the best fertilizer for the farmer's fields is the farmer's footsteps.
The footsteps Fred Eaton must follow are those of his great-grandfather Timothy, who started it all in 1869. He was an Irish Protestant immigrant who revolutionized Canadian retailing business with a policy of no barter and no credit. He also wrote one of the most famous guarantees in business: goods satisfactory or money refunded.
He was a very lucky man, and being Irish, people associated the luck with him, and they would touch his toe, and you could see it shined up from all the people who've touched it for good luck. And I do it too. It's often brought me good luck.
This cathedral to commerce was not just built on luck alone. Experience and old-fashioned cunning played a pretty big role too, and competition, which came very early to Timothy Eaton. Just 3 years after he opened the Toronto store, another immigrant, this time from Scotland, set up shop right across the street. His name was Robert Simpson.
Unlike Timothy, Robert Simpson had no heirs to continue his business. By 1929, ownership of Simpsons Limited had fallen into the hands of 3 men, one of whom, Charles Luther Burton, became Simpsons' president. It was the beginning of the Burton era at Simpsons. George Allen Burton, son of Charles Luther, the third Burton to run Simpsons. He took over after his elder brother Edgar died in 1968. Allen Burton had started out to be an architect, but it was the Depression. Architects were starving. He gave up his dream and took a job in the stockroom at Simpsons.
I've never seen a promotional value in all the years that I've been with Simpsons. Never. This promotion we have.
I've never seen a promotional value.
No.
I mean, the one is good.
Like the one we have here.
Yeah.
Absolutely fabulous. Fantastic.
In 1978, Allen Burton, chairman and chief executive officer, oversees a $700 million business. But on an inspection tour of a new Simpsons store, Allen Burton reverts to frustrated architect.
He's just got, what, 100-watt lights in there?
No, 200 watts.
See whether that can be brightened up.
Another Burton working at Simpsons is Allen's nephew, Ted. He's the president of the company.
But those things have got to be put back the way they were. 32 men, and how many Jeeps on this thing? They're probably taking about 10.
A position of power is nothing new for Allen Burton. Long before he took charge of Simpson's, he had commanded the Governor General's Horse Guards. Today, he's that regiment's honorary colonel.
And they're getting some leadership training on the way back from Covert.
One principle of war and of business is to fight your battles from a position of strength. Ignoring this basic principle would cost Alan Burton dearly in the coming year, completely change his business life and his position in the Canadian establishment. In the spring of 1978, the Burtons own just 10% of Simpson's shares, but they run the company as if they own all of it. They've made it as much a family concern as their rivals, the Eatons.
Yes, would you tell him that, says Father calling, would you tell him I'll be up at the west door of Yorkdale? There are a lot of Burtons in the Simpson business. I don't think it's all that deliberate. I think the fact is that all your life you really absorb what is Simpson's, and it's very deeply ingrained into you, maybe deeper than you think.
Far from the 32nd floor corner offices of Simpson's headquarters, known to aspiring executives as the Tower, another Burton waits in the wings. In the suburban Toronto shopping center of Yorkdale, the Simpson store manager is Alan Burton's son, Jamie.
Flowers all go downstairs.
Right underneath the escalator. It becomes the base of that.
Plant.
And it's so then you really have a good base to your escalator.
If all goes as planned, Jamie will be next in line to take over as chairman,
Well, it'll be down
but
by
only after his Uncle Ted has had his turn. The Burton dynasty at Simpson's seems secure.
Christmas cards.
People have often said, it's your destiny, you're a Burton, you must work in Simpson's. I very much disagree with that. I think it's probably the most difficult thing you can do is to work in a family type of business. You're totally under scrutiny the whole time. A very revered ex-senior executive of this company once told me that half the people will like me because I'm a Burton, and the other half will hate me because I'm a Burton.
The Burtons were already well-known members of the Toronto establishment when Alan Burton was born in 1915. Growing up a Burton meant living in the posh Toronto district of Rosedale and studying in private schools. At 23, Alan Burton got married, and shortly afterwards went overseas to fight in the war. Serving in the Governor General's Horse Guards, the young major won the Distinguished Service Order for his skill and cool-headedness in battle. The war experience had a profound effect on Alan Burton.
I think one of the major physical differences that the war made in me was it toughened me up a great deal. In fact, I had quite a noticeable stutter before the war, and I think I've overcome a good deal of that. And that was from talking on the wireless 16, 17 hours a day. But actually, when I first started in action, I used to have to write out every single message before I tried to broadcast it, or I couldn't get it across properly.
It's the Betty Kennedy Show.
Today on the show, talk of the boilers that Ontario...
Alan Burton married broadcaster Betty Kennedy after his first wife died in 1975. Betty's first husband also died in that year. She works for CFRB, a radio station owned by Argus Corporation.
I never had the intention of living alone. I didn't think my late wife would like that any more than I would. And I'm quite sure that Betty had no intention of ever marrying again. And how the two views were reconciled, I can't say at this point.
Not only is Betty Kennedy a broadcaster and mother and stepmother to 12 children, she's also a business associate of Alan's. Betty Kennedy Burton is the only woman on the Simpsons board of directors. The Simpsons board is considered one of the strongest and best connected small boards in the country.
We received a long letter from the
I've been asked to be on a number of different boards. As a matter of fact, this was the first one I had accepted. And sitting around that table, you knew that every one of those men were a powerhouse in their own right. They were dealing with major companies, major problems. And I think when someone has that kind of competence, then there's an air of confidence about them. They don't have to speak in a loud voice. They don't have to be bluff and hale and hearty. There's a quiet confidence, and it shows in the way those people behave.
And I'd say, you know, I would stiff arm him. I wouldn't cooperate with him in any way.
Except the one thing, Bill, it seems to me...
In the summer of 1978, this is the board of Simpsons. Bill Wilder of Gulf and Arctic Gas, Alf Powis, president of Noranda, Jack C. Barrow, chairman of Simpson Sears, Charles Gundy of Wood Gundy Investments, Jim Torrey, partner in one of Canada's most prestigious corporate law firms, and perhaps the most powerful chief executive officer in the country, chairman of the huge Canadian Pacific Group, Ian Sinclair. The board might be impressive, but Simpson's profits are not. The balance sheet could have been worse were it not for something that happened 25 years ago. In 1953, Simpsons and the Chicago-based firm of Sears Roebuck formed an alliance to create a new company, Simpson Sears of Canada. In the deal, Simpsons Limited retained its department stores but handed over its mail-order business to the new company. Sears Roebuck put up $20 million in cash, and together they are equal partners sharing control of Simpson Sears.
By 1978, Simpson Sears is the largest department store retailer in the country. Sales passed the $2 billion mark, and it's easily outperforming its sluggish parent company, Simpsons.
'78 seems a banner year for celebrating silver anniversaries. In June, Alan Burton and his wife Betty hold a party at their home outside Toronto.
Good morning. How are you this morning? Have a good time last night?
The guests are employees celebrating their 25th year at Simpsons.
I can't shake hands with everybody this morning. We're going to hold up the line too much.
The management of Simpsons has been a family affair, and that Burton feeling for family extends to their 15,000 employees. 2,300 two-pound Christmas cakes are sent out each year to Simpsons pensioners. And although there is no union at Simpsons, there is a liberal stock purchase and pension plan. Now the employees own about 7% of the company's stock. The employer, the Burtons, have a mere 3% more than that. Hardly a position of strength to fight a battle from.
Isn't that your right name?
Yeah, that's Peter. That's my right name, and of course, on my paycheck is on patents too, but I collect it anyway.
Well, Chateau Petrus is one of the nicest wines, you know.
A month after this party, Alan Burton will host what will turn out to be the most important event in his business life. July 1978. Alan Burton gives an anniversary dinner for Edward Telling, the chairman of Sears Roebuck. Sears Roebuck is the world's largest retailer. Annual sales of $18 billion. That's 2% of the GNP of the United States. And during the dinner, Burton reveals to Telling a problem that's been bothering him. Over the years, effective control over the company has slipped out of family hands, and that means that anybody with the money could just walk in and take over Simpsons. 6 weeks after that dinner, Edward Telling of Sears Roebuck comes up with a merger plan for Simpsons and Simpson Sears. And it's an offer that Alan Burton cannot refuse.
They flattered me by saying that I would be the chairman and chief executive officer, and they wanted me to continue beyond normal retirement, and I psyched myself up to that, and that was fine.
Alan Burton would become chairman of the board of the newly merged Simpsons Sears. It would be the 7th largest company in Canada, with total sales of $3.2 billion. No other department store chain in the country could come even close, not even the Eatons.
On August the 16th, 1978, G. Alan Burton, chairman and chief executive officer of Simpsons Limited, and Jack C. Barrow, chairman and chief executive officer of Simpson Sears Limited, announced that a merger of Simpsons Limited and Simpson Sears Limited had been approved in principle.
Because Sears Roebuck, an American corporation, will own 33 1/3% of the shares, the largest single block, and thus have effective control of the new company, the merger has to be approved by the Canadian government's Foreign Investment Review Agency, or FIRA for short. FIRA can stop this merger cold if it decides the merger is not of significant benefit to Canada.
What percentage will be Canadian owned? What percentage will be owned by the Burton family?
Correct.
What do you mean the Burton family aren't Canadian?
No, not at all, but I assume there are other Canadian shareholders.
Thank you. Well, roughly 66 2/3, I presume, will be Canadian-owned. And I haven't worked out what our holdings would come to at this point. Anybody help me out on that?
No matter what the figures are, the Burton family has done well. Ted Burton will become president of the Simpsons division of the new company. As for Alan Burton, it means he will finally leave his own mark on the corporate history of Simpsons. 25 years ago, Alan's brother Edgar was hailed for forging the enormously profitable link between Simpsons and Sears Roebuck. Before that, there was the long shadow of their father, Charles Luther, a legendary figure in the business community, accorded the title Merchant Prince of Canada. Now, Alan would surpass them both. He would be Merchant King of Canada. The euphoria of the glory days of the summer of 1978 continues into the fall. It's the Bronfman family of Montreal who is now throwing a party. They own Cadillac Fairview, a development company that has just built a new shopping mall in St. Bruno, Quebec. A shopping mall that has, for the first time, Simpsons, Eaton's, and the Bay, all under one roof. Mingling among the Bronfman's 3,000 invited guests are some of the cream of the Toronto business establishment who have flown in for the event. The Eatons are here. So are the Burtons. Ted Burton grew up next door to Fred and John Craig Eaton. They used to play store together as children. Over several summers, they managed to make $50. They named their store the T.R. Seton Company.
We've been spying on you.
We got a spy, though. Your big brother is looking at over his shoulder here at us.
You taking tours tonight?
The Eatons have just opened their new $250 million Eaton Center. Simpson Sears is involved in the impending merger with the Burtons of Simpsons.
I'll tell them the truth about it, because they'll never be able to carry the message.
Of the 4 biggest department store chains, only the Winnipeg-based Hudson's Bay seems to be quiet.
But the Bay, without much publicity, has just bought up Zellers, a retail discount chain. It's on the prowl for bigger game. Sitting up there in the president's office is a man who used to work for Eaton's in Winnipeg, running their Western stores, and confidently expecting to be made president and leaving when he's passed over for the job. It was said at the time, the Toronto business establishment found him unacceptable.
Now, Donald McGivern sits in his Toronto executive office, watching the Simpsons merger with a great deal of interest. His employer, Hudson's Bay, has had its eye on Simpsons since 1938.
When the Simpson and Simpson Sears announcement was made, it occurred to some of us that a fundamental change in what we believed to be the Simpson thinking had come along, namely that they would be prepared for change and obviously prepared to be an integral part of a much larger thing. And so that started us thinking about it again.
On Thursday, November 16th, 1978, Alan Burton and his wife Betty are spending an evening at the Toronto Royal Winter Fair Horse Show. Alan has had a lifelong passion for horses. For more than 40 years, he's been riding to hounds on fall weekends. For almost a quarter of a century, he's been master of the hunt. He's on the executive of the Royal Winter Fair and has a ringside box reserved for him. These seats are one of the most valued possessions a member of the Toronto establishment can have. They've been known to be passed down as prized family heirlooms. Secure in the bosom of the Canadian establishment, there's probably no happier man in the audience. Tonight, the Burton Cup is to be presented by Alan's daughter. The merger seems to be moving ahead, despite the ongoing investigation by the Foreign Investment Review Agency. It seems almost certain now that by January of 1979, Alan Burton will be in the chairman's seat of the new company. But while the Burtons watch the horse competition, elsewhere in the city there's an emergency meeting of the board of directors of Hudson's Bay. The topic of discussion is whether or not to make a bid to buy Simpson's.
And so about 10 o'clock that night, the board, and it was a strenuous meeting as to be sure that we were doing the right thing for everybody involved. 10 o'clock, 10:30 at night, they said, okay, let's go. Stupidly, I'd sort of thought that might be the decision, so I'd carefully gotten Mr. Alan Burton's telephone number after the meeting because I wanted to get to him first, and Alan said that I can't even dial long distance, and that was proven. That evening I couldn't find him. And so the following morning, early, started to try and track him again and succeeded in reaching him. November 17th, about 8 o'clock in the morning, I was about to leave to catch the plane to go to Florida for a weekend meeting, an organization I belong to. And phone rang, I answered it, and Don McGivern was on the other end of the phone, and he said he'd been trying to get me for some time. He wanted to tell me that the Hudson Bay Company was going to put in a bid for Simpson's, and he wanted me to be the first to know. I was naturally very surprised, and all I could think of saying was, thank you very much, Don, which he thought was rather peculiar. I don't know what he expected, but he kept repeating this in the papers after that he politely said, thank you very much, and that was the end of the conversation.
And Alan came back into the kitchen and said, well, that was Don McGivern. They're putting in a takeover bid for Simpson's. And I said, I guess you don't want to go to Florida. So he took off his coat, and we went and told the driver that the trip was off. And that, I think, was the beginning of one of the most hectic periods of our life.
For about 10 years, Alan Burton has been keeping a diary. Perhaps it's a reminder of the war years when he had to write daily dispatches.
I have Friday the 17th. War is declared. Well, this is what I wrote. This whole business was almost letter perfect to a scenario we considered as part of our long-range planning. So while it's upsetting, we didn't panic. We called a meeting for 1,000 hours to plan strategy. And then I phoned Earl McLaughlin and caught him boarding a plane to Bermuda, and I asked him to be prepared to back us up to $500 million. And he said, Canadian or U.S.? I said, Canadian. He said, okay, but I'll have to lay off some of the other banks. So now we had flexibility. I got a phone call from Ian Sinclair who said he would attend the board meeting, but don't worry, they can't push us around. We have some muscle, you know. Didn't have much muscle when we got down. Monday, November the 20th, was the first war cabinet meeting, as I wrote it. We met at 900 hours in the Simpson boardroom. We spent a long and frustrating day trying to work out combinations of extra dividends and white knight situations to meet the Hudson Bay offer, supposedly a value of $8.27 per Simpson share. Frankly, I think it's a hard offer to match.
Analysts say the offer is worth $1.50 more to shareholders than the Simpson-Sears deal. The battle for the hearts and stocks of the Simpson shareholders has begun. It might be an omen, but Betty Kennedy has just started writing a book about Hurricane Hazel, a natural disaster that struck Toronto 25 years ago. At headquarters in Toronto, Alan Burton plans strategies to repulse the Bay's attack. Some of his troops are waging the battle on another front.
We had several people in Ottawa The news from Ottawa was that the FIRA decision could not be given until a week from Thursday, which scuttles our plans. In that particular time, we were in the middle of the Foreign Investment Review Agency investigations into the merger, and they were doing a great job, and we were under wraps not to say anything about what they had talked to us about. And so we were now entering a new fight with really one hand tied behind our back.
At the same time, another group is lobbying in Ottawa. The Bay is here to stop the merger by persuading FIRA that the American Sears Roebuck will dominate the new company. Now, the FIRA decision will have to be approved by the federal cabinet, and the Bay has hired a former finance minister, Donald MacDonald, now turned corporate lawyer, to put its case to his old pals in the cabinet. Back in the boardrooms of Simpson's, Alan Burton has an additional problem, this time with his American allies Sears Roebuck. They seem to be getting cold feet. The deal isn't looking as good to them as it did before the Bay got into the act.
I guess Thursday, November the 30th was the next important date. We had a directors' meeting. I write, it was a long, frustrating day without many answers and many phone calls to Jack Kincannon of Sears to try and get him to approve a press release saying Sears was considering improvements to their offer. The resulting release was a much watered-down version saying we, Simpson Sears and Sears Roebuck, are considering improvements in the offer. This will go out tomorrow morning. And it also advises shareholders not at this time to put their shares with the Hudson Bay Company.
This morning, back on Bay Street, the Simpson directors met behind closed doors to finalize Simpson's position to be presented to the company's stockholders, who were mostly confused on the merits of the two offers from Sears and the Bay.
This is no longer the traditional image of the genteel world of Canadian business, of disputes settled by a gentleman's word and a handshake in some private club. This is now a public slugfest. And as the battle rages on, the strain and tension begin to show on Alan Burton.
If the Bay is successful, it will become the largest retail department store chain in the country.
Tomorrow is a full day of the War Cabinet, and by 15:30 hours, I lay down for a rest and fell into a deep sleep, not waking up until 20:30. Got up and had a bowl of cereal and went back to sleep and slept all night, 15 hours in all.
While the Bay and Simpsons go at each other, the Eatons watch with interest from the sidelines. If they have any favorite in the corporate battle, they don't say. They have more pressing problems to worry about. There are only so many shopping days left before Christmas. The Eatons are, of course, merchants, and it's time for them to put on display that patron saint of retailing, Santa Claus. 35 million people will watch this parade, including 2 happy Eaton boys.
My spirits sank to a new low. I'm running a temperature just under 100 and have a racking cough. Jim Torrey is despondent and very tired.
It was an unbelievably hectic time. I think it was a time of great strain. I think perhaps the fact that I was on the board worked to both of our advantages. When you go home at the end of the day, Alan didn't have to sit down and try to explain the complicated things that were happening, the nuances of many fine points that came up for discussion, because you were there. You took part in them, you heard them, and you saw the problems and the possibilities and so on.
But the problems are increasing, and the possibilities are becoming more limited. Time is running out. FIRA still hasn't made its decision, even though Sears Roebuck has sweetened the deal by making numerous concessions. More and more shareholders are leaning towards the Bay offer. The board has to come up with a new plan to stop the Bay. December 11th, after a 2-hour board meeting, Simpsons announces a brilliantly complicated plan. The idea, strangely enough, comes from Sears Roebuck in the States, and it involves Simpson Sears. The directors of the board have known all along that the Bay offer to buy Simpsons is as much for their 50% investment in Simpson Sears as it is for their 21 Simpson stores.
What Simpsons Limited proposes to do is this. take all of its shares in Simpson Sears, which is about $200 million worth, and turn them over to its own shareholders as a dividend. Now, if that sounds confusing, it sounded confusing to the stockbrokers, too. Some of them weren't even sure it was legal. But what it seemed to mean was this. First, Simpson's was prepared to relinquish control in Simpson Sears. Second, the value of those shares would go down to about a third of what it had been worth, and the Bay would just have to pull out. Now all they needed was approval from Ottawa.
December the 14th, cabinet decision. This is D-Day, when the federal cabinet must decide to let us merge or deny it. We spent a very tense morning waiting, and by 1300 hours the word came through. The cabinet had decided in our favor. We had won.
It looks as though the battle is over. That day, the front page of the Montreal Gazette carries the headline, "Simpsons wins merger battle, Bay shut out." Don McGivern of the Bay, who had spent the last 2 days in Ottawa desperately trying to postpone the cabinet decision, calls it a shattering blow, a silver bullet into the heart of the Bay offer.
The FIRA decision, as I just pointed out, was devastating. I could hardly believe it. I consider at least in the short term, the decision to dividend out the Simpson Sears shares owned by Simpsons to Simpsons shareholders as being a very astute thing. It was a clever maneuver. Frankly, for 24 hours, we didn't know what to do about it. We really thought we were dead in the water. And then people began to talk about it and think about alternatives, and most of them were no good, but a little piece of that one led somebody on, and finally the approach we did take was evolved.
December 15th, Alan Burton is still unaware that the Bay has decided to fight back.
At 9:30, we held a shareholders' meeting, which was quickly terminated due to the changed circumstances. I made a short speech to them, to the few that turned out, but there were no questions. Santa Claus in uniform came up front to wish us a Merry Christmas. I had an interview with a Maclean's magazine reporter and a long session with the photographer who got me to pose in casual manner, I may regret. I'm feeling somewhat better, but in spite of the Maclean's photographer prediction that we were front runners, and he was instructed to get extra shots of me, I felt somehow let down.
Alan Burton is just beginning to realize the weakness of his position. Simpsons no longer has control of Simpson Sears. The American company could now, if the Bay were to win, get to keep Simpson Sears without any of the problems of partners or FIRA. In the eyes of Sears Roebuck, Simpsons and its management are now expendable.
I feel that Sears Roebuck would rather not see the merger proceed now that we are naked. They've all to gain and not much to lose. And Simpson Sears is understandably lukewarm. If there's any chance of winning, we'd need vigorous support from them. I no longer feel in charge because there are just too many legal maneuvers going on from several directions at the same time. We must trust Tory and LeMessurier and God. Jim is to meet with the Securities Commission tomorrow a.m.
Meanwhile, the Bay makes an announcement to the Simpson shareholders.
What we said was to them, directly to those shareholders, you have exactly what you had before. We were prepared to bid for what you had before at $8.36 or 7 cents, as I recall. We are still prepared to buy it from you if you'd care to deliver both things. They've been separated, but you own both as individual shareholders, and we'll continue our bid for both.
Apparently, the opinion that Hudson Bay's offer wouldn't hold up was wrong.
The National with Knowlton Nash.
It looks tonight as if the Hudson's Bay Company is on its way to becoming the biggest department store chain in Canada. It now appears almost certain that the Bay has won the corporate battle for control of Simpsons, thanks to a move by Simpsons today that surprised even the executives at the Bay. Fred Langen reports.
This afternoon, Simpsons threw in the towel and all but put an end to one of the most dramatic takeover bids in Canadian business history.
We were negotiating right up to the last moment to try and get some flexibility from across the border, which wasn't forthcoming. But I was surprised when the first word that I'd got that we'd pulled out in the merger came across the Dow Jones loudspeaker in Wood Gundy's office. And at this point, this had come out of a statement that our lawyer had made that if this happened, we would have to pull out. And the Dow Jones reporter had dashed out and said they pulled out. And that's what came across the wire, and that was the first intimation I had that we supposedly had pulled out. However, it was a fact.
While the dust of battle is settling in Toronto, Fred Eaton flies to New York.
It's an honor to represent retailers all over the world in presenting this award to the International Retailer of the Year, Frederick Eaton, President and Chief Executive Officer of the renowned T. Eaton Company. Fred, it is an honor to recognize all these achievements by presenting you with this plaque.
15 years ago, the Eaton's rivals, the Burtons, had won this same award.
I accept this award with a great deal of honor and humility because it is the supreme accolade an international retailer can achieve from his peers. It also puts us in the company of our old and distinguished rival, the Robert Simpson Company, although these days at Simpson's, it's hard not to think of the Bay. We are a growing and vital company with our sales approaching $1.5 billion. Sometime in the future, God willing, another Eaton may come before this group to receive this honor. He or she, no doubt, will say the same thing I do today. Thank you for paying this tribute to Eaton's, and thanks to all the Eaton people who have made us such a great company. Thank you.
The Eatons have had 4 generations to fine-tune their sense of proprietorship.
No, I think the Burtons ran Simpson's as if they owned it. And indeed, they did own quite a bit of it and shared, and some of their larger shareholders were on the board. The difference was that they didn't own 100%, as my brothers and I do. And if you allow yourself not to have a controlling interest, or at least a very large percentage, you're always vulnerable to being taken over.
The amalgamation of Simpsons Limited and Bayhood Incorporated is one of the steps necessary to implement the merger of Simpsons Limited and Hudson Bay Company.
The meeting to ratify the takeover of Simpsons by the Bay. It's a new Simpsons. Its board of directors has changed. Ian Sinclair has resigned. So have Bill Wilder, Alf Powys, and Betty Kennedy.
Is there any discussion?
While Alan Burton presides over the dismantling of the Simpsons that he grew up with, a mysterious figure sits alone in the shadows of the back row. He's probably the wealthiest man in the country. His name is Ken Thompson. In a remarkable turn of events, he has become Alan Burton's boss.
I therefore declare that the special resolution has been duly passed by at least 2/3 of the votes cast at the meeting, and accordingly, the amalgamation agreement has been approved and adopted.
Good evening. There's another enormous business takeover underway in Canada, and once again, it involves the Hudson's Bay Company. This time, however, the Bay is not buying. The Thompson business empire wants to buy the Bay. Thompson is probably best known for its newspapers, including the Times of London. But most recently, it has been reaping fortunes from investments in Britain's North Sea oil wells. The Bay owns an oil and gas company in addition to its department stores.
My own feelings were, first of all, I was surprised. Hudson's Bay had been rumored for, 2 or 3 years. Once a week, somebody phoned me to tell me that somebody's milk company was going to take over Hudson's Bay, you know. So it had been rumored, and to that degree, we looked very carefully at who the potentials were, because there was a lot of money, and there aren't that many people. Truthfully, I never thought of the Thompson organization. Never occurred to me at all.
In this new battle, the battle for the Bay, Alan Burton can be a completely detached bystander.
He's been the little fish that was gobbled up by the big fish. And now the big boys are in for the kill. And Burton can sit here in his tower and look down there at Ken Thompson's tower and reflect that the wars are somebody else's problem now. But Ken Thompson still has to fight off another contender, another heir to a huge family fortune, Galen Weston. It makes front-page news all across the nation. And unlike Alan Burton's photograph for Maclean's, which was never used, Ken Thompson's makes it to the front cover. The editor of Maclean's magazine, author of the book The Canadian Establishment, Peter C. Newman, occasionally handles reporter's duties, especially if the interviewee is the media-shy tycoon Ken Thompson, heir and only son of Canadian-born Lord Thompson of Fleet. Roy Thompson left his heirs 184 newspapers, a host of television stations, shares in North Sea Oil, and scores of other enterprises. The total estimated to be worth well over $1 billion. His son, Ken Thompson, returned to Canada to expand the family fortunes, and his first move was to buy the bay.
Oh, Fred Eaton. Fred was the first chap to phone me. He said, I hope this call is not premature. It was when the offer was made. And, of course, a long way to go since the offer, between the making of the first offer and the ultimate success. But Fred said, I hope it's not a premature call, but he said, I wish you luck. He says, welcome to the world of merchandising.
At one point, the world of art collecting seemed to be more to the liking of Ken Thompson. He still has the world's largest privately owned collection of Kriegoffs. 144 of them hang in his office.
Do you attribute this to the sort of Canadian character, or because in the States I think there would have been a much fiercer battle?
It was a good, clean struggle, and it was a tough one. And for a while I wondered just what we'd got into. And if it taught me one thing, it is this, that you may have the resources in certain situations, but they aren't enough, always. You can go in an auction, buy painting at auction, and if you bid a little more than the other fellow, you've got the painting. It isn't that simple when it comes to a situation like the Hudson's Bay struggle.
Your father would have been very proud of that, of the Bay.
Oh, I think he would have been thrilled. Look, I think I know he surprised me right up to the end. Really, he was such an extraordinary human being. I knew him pretty well. He was capable of surprising me, but I could read him on this one. I can tell you right now, he would have been absolutely delighted with it. I know that.
His father, Roy Thompson, had first eyed the Hudson's Bay Company in the early 70s. It was an institution with a grand history, just like his pride and joy, the prestigious newspaper, the Times of London. Ken bought the Bay, and also Canada's answer to the Times, the Globe and Mail. Before Roy Thompson died, he said he wanted a family dynasty. Now he has one.
In the United States, where a lot of companies are coming under public ownership, in Canada, very large firms are moving into private hands, mentioning the Blacks, the Bassetts, Rogers, Eatons, etc. But it can also go the other way. In the case of the Burtons, for example, they are now not out of office, but certainly out of power. And I wonder if you could just talk about the notion of proprietorships.
Well, you know, when you talk like that, I just think of water finding its own level. If heads of families can build up their companies so that they have an increasing ownership and control over them, fine. They must be doing it on success. And if they're doing it on success, that's got to be good for the companies, the employees, the shareholders, the country. Now, I'd like to think that the Thompson family has got enough momentum going and enough ambition left that my father initiated, and that, thank goodness, rubbed off, I hope, to some extent on me and the other members of the family, that we can keep that thing rolling to the benefit of all of us associated with our companies. If we ever reach the point where the family hasn't got that kind of initiative and integrity and ambition and capabilities, then I don't think, frankly, and maybe I'm talking about the future and it's easy for me to do that, I don't think that would be a bad thing if we did, if the Thompson family no longer controlled those organizations. Maybe we then need a black to come in.
This is a kind of a Darwinian scenario with the survival of the
Well,
fittest.
yes, but in a nice way, not a vicious way. I just think that efficiency and success is really the name of the business game.
Ladies and gentlemen, Gordon Sinclair, Miss Betty Kennedy, guest panelist Juliet, Pierre Burton.
Well, we're leading off with a national story, a hidden challenger. 2 minutes to get our guest's story. Pierre, would you lead off, please?
This national story, is it in the area of entertainment?
No.
Is it a story that took place in the 70s?
Oui.
Did it take place this year?
Oui.
Is that a phony French-Canadian accent you're attempting?
Oui.
Toronto
I think I recognize the voice.
You would.
I think I do.
All right. We've played hunches before. Why not? He was trying to
Is your
disguise
name Burton, the same as other Burtons around here?
Oui.
Honey,
Betty.
just something about the we.
Well, if you hadn't got it, we'd have raised a few eyebrows. Now, what was the story be, Betty? You can't let it
Well,
go
the
just
Bay takeover of Simpsons,
That's
and then the Thompson
That's
takeover
close
of the
enough.
Bay, and it goes on.
Welcome, please, the president of Simpsons Limited, Alan Burton.
Well, I'm going to start by not asking a question, but by straightening it out that you're not the president, you're the chairman.
And chief executive.
And chief executive
Thank you.
officer. Okay, so we keep the record straight.
But Alan Burton now shares that chairman's title with Don McGivern of the Bay. Simpsons' rivals, the Eatons, have completed a walkway connecting the Eaton Center with the Simpsons stores. And now one of Alan Burton's functions is ribbon cutting. The walkway was planned in the days when the Burtons ran Simpsons, and now Simpsons belongs to the Thompsons.
It's different. I've been my own boss for 30 years, roughly, and I think that once you're not in the public eye and not in a top position, there is a very subtle erosion of power that you didn't even dream that you had. I think occasionally when somebody phones up from one of the papers and wants a statement, I have to sit back and think, well, should I make this statement on our behalf anymore, or should I not? I think that is the restriction that enters your mind. I don't think anybody can be completely independent anymore. It's got to be a team effort, and somebody's got to be boss.
When situations change in business and you are used to running things, you're used to being chairman of the board, you're used to all of the things that means, you're used to the authority that goes with it. I think when those things change, and there's no sense saying that they don't change, they do in a takeover. They change in many subtle ways. I think a lesser man would find that almost impossible to cope with.
Despite the loss of power, Alan Burton has personally made several $1 million out of the Bay takeover.
I don't think wealth can buy happiness or peace of mind or anything else. I think it stems from something entirely different. I certainly think having the means to produce situations of happiness for yourself and other people is a very satisfying thing. But I can conceive of being happy in a cabin. I don't need all this. I think I'd like to have a nice wife like Betty, and I'd like to have a good horse and a few things. When you're doing this kind of stuff, it's you're just doing a fun thing.
The frustrated architect finally has time to paint.
Imaginative thing. But to do a highly detailed sketch requires a lot of, I think, nervous energy. For instance, when I was under a great deal of stress myself, I found that I couldn't paint at all. Because my heart was pounding too much. And I was just I think you've got to be in good physical condition to paint, believe it or not.
Alan Burton's workload is diminished, and he's gradually severing his ties with the business world.
You can't ride along as part of the establishment unless you're making a contribution to it. Because as soon as you stop contributing, as soon as you stop being an active part of the establishment gets rid of you. If you're not an active person in the establishment, you won't be in the establishment. You can't ride on the coattails of your father or your or your ancestors in any way. You have to be active in it.
Jamie Burton, Alan's son, has finally made it to one of Simpson's executive offices. Where once it was his destiny to run Simpson's, he's now sales promotion manager.
I think probably the greatest thing about the whole changeover is, as far as my children are concerned, they finally get to live the life of a normal human being. They make their own way in the world, they'll do their own things, and I think that as a family, we will disappear from the forefront of the establishment fairly quickly, and I think that's great for my children, because they'll have a chance to develop their own initiatives, make their own way in the world, and if my segment of the family comes back, I can blame it on my son. So that's tremendous, you know.
No, we haven't lost any, but they're hunting a fox. They came across here, but we didn't know whether they came across the road or not, you know.
In the fall of 1979, Alan Burton is no longer master of the hunt. In fact, he no longer rides at all. His back has been troubling him. He also announces he will retire shortly as chairman of the board of Simpson's.
I'm hoping to do a lot of constructive things. I'm going to have an office in the tower. I'm going to work a minimum of 3 days a week. And after nearly 45 years, that seems to be a fair division. But like the Englishman said, the trouble with Wednesday is it ruins the weekend at both ends.
November 1979, Remembrance Day.
You don't look your yearly. You look great.
Saluting base is just right there.
Yeah.
Lieutenant Colonel G. Alan Burton, DSO, former commanding officer of the Governor General's Horse Guard, pauses to review the troops, pauses to remember dead comrades, pauses to remember old campaigns, and perhaps to remember more recent struggles.
I certainly have never been in a more difficult situation since the war. And I hope never to be in another situation like it in business. It wasn't all that terrible, except that it was long and drawn out and confusing. You didn't have any real sense of accomplishment in the thing. It was like fighting your way out of a sticky mud bath the whole way.
January 4th, 1980. They have come to clean the offices of Alan Burton for the last time. Tomorrow, he'll be moving from his corner executive office on the 32nd floor to a smaller one somewhere on a lower floor. The Burton era at Simpson's has come to an end.